Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into a conversation that's literally thousands of years old. We're going to explore how some of the biggest, most mind-bending questions in modern science were actually first debated by absolutely brilliant thinkers in ancient India. Let's get into it. So on one side, you have this question that's pretty much the foundation of modern physics, right? Is everything we see, everything we are, just a super complex arrangement of tiny particles, all just following a set of impersonal laws? But then, on the flip side, there's the great mystery. Is consciousness, your inner world of thoughts and feelings and experiences, is that just some random byproduct of brain chemistry? Or could it be something way more fundamental to the universe itself? These two questions, they really set the stage for everything we're about to explore. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the ancient questions, then look at two very different answers, the universe's atoms and consciousness versus matter. Then, and this is the cool part, we'll see how these ideas pop up in modern science and wrap up with why this is still a totally unfinished conversation. Okay, first up, ancient questions, modern debates. We're starting with this timeless human drive to figure out what reality is all about, a quest that began way, way before we had modern science labs. And in this incredibly rich intellectual tradition, two schools of thought in particular came up with ideas that are just shockingly relevant today. We're talking about the Vaiśeṣika and the Sāṅkhya systems. So let's dive in and see what they had to say. All right, section 2, the universe as atoms. First, let's look at the Vaiśeṣika school. They put forward a vision of the universe that honestly an early modern scientist would have found totally familiar. The Vaiśeṣika school, which is credited to a sage named Kaṇāda, had this really revolutionary idea. The entire physical world is just made of atoms. They argued that you could break everything down into these fundamental, indivisible bits. They called these particles anu. And really, the best way to picture them is like ancient Legos. They're these eternal, tiny little building blocks that combine in all sorts of different ways to create everything we see in the material world, from a rock to a planet. And what's so wild here is just how modern this sounds. The early Vaiśeṣika view was purely materialistic, a universe made of atoms running on natural laws. And in this original version, you didn't even need a god. It was just a self-contained, self-regulating system. But, over time, they ran into a problem. If these atoms are just bouncing around randomly, how in the world do they create something as complex and orderly as a living creature or a solar system? To fix this, later thinkers in the school brought in the idea of Ishvara, or God, not as a creator who made things from scratch, but more like a master builder, a guiding intelligence that directs the atoms to combine in these beautiful, purposeful ways. Okay, section 3, consciousness versus matter. So while Vaiśeṣika was all about atoms, the Sāṅkhya school was obsessed with a totally different puzzle, consciousness itself. The Sāṅkhya school, tied to the sage Kapila, came up with this radical idea called dualism. They basically said, look, reality isn't just one thing. It's two fundamentally different, totally independent principles. You've got prakṛti, which is all of nature and matter, and puruṣa, which is pure consciousness or spirit. And this is a brilliant way to understand it. Think of prakṛti as the stage. It's everything that happens. It's the unconscious, dynamic stuff that evolves into the entire universe, our bodies, our minds, even our egos. But puruṣa, that's the silent audience. It's just pure passive awareness that watches the whole play unfold. It never acts. It only and ever witnesses. And this leads to a pretty mind-blowing conclusion. For the Sāṅkhya school, consciousness isn't something the brain produces. Nope. It's a basic, irreducible feature of reality, just as fundamental as matter and energy. So let's move on to section 4, echoes in modern science. We've got these two powerful ancient ideas, right? One about atoms, the other about consciousness. What's truly incredible is how they map directly onto the biggest debates happening in science and philosophy right now. This is where it all just clicks into place. The original Vaiśeṣika idea of atomism, well, that's pretty much scientific materialism. The later addition of a guiding intelligence, that's the modern fine-tuning argument in a nutshell, the question of whether cosmic order points to a designer. And Sāṅkhya's dualism perfectly captures what philosophers today call the hard problem of consciousness. So what's the hard problem? It's this. We can map every single neuron that fires in your brain when you see the color red. That's the easy part. But what we have zero scientific explanation for is why you have the inner subjective feeling of redness. Sāṅkhya tackled this exact problem thousands of years ago by saying, hey, maybe experience isn't produced by matter at all. Maybe it's a completely separate, fundamental thing. And that brings us to our final section, an unfinished conversation. Because the thing is, these ancient questions still matter so much. This dialogue is far, far from over. When you boil it all down, the human quest to understand what's real has always been this back and forth between materialism and transcendence. And it's a dialogue that started millennia ago and is still happening right now in the halls of science and philosophy. So why does any of this matter to you? Because these are not just historical curiosities. These are live debates, and they shape everything: how we design artificial intelligence, how we think about medicine and psychology, and how we, as individuals, search for meaning in a universe that is both stunningly ordered and deeply mysterious. So, we are left with the exact same profound question that these ancient thinkers first asked, a question that just keeps echoing through the centuries. Is the universe just an intricate machine of matter, simply playing itself out? Or is there a consciousness, a silent witness, listening to it all?